I'm supposed to allow no participant to speak more than 1 or 2 minutes, and I'm not supposed to allow anyone to repeatedly share their ideas or dominate the discussion. So those are the ground rules. Everybody knows the rules, and we can do that. He also asked me to kind of outline a framework for economic development, or at least my views, that might be a bit controversial, spark a little bit of discussion, or at least get people thinking. So I prepared a 2-minute little gig here with some of my ideas, and actually they're not, at least in my mind, too controversial. I actually believe them, which is this. The future has to be bright since the present and the recent past is so bleak. Vermont lacks and has lacked a cogent economic development strategy for almost as long as I've been involved in this business, and that's 25 years in this end of it and 15 years in human services, working with abused and neglected and delinquent kids. So as long as I've been around in Vermont, I don't think any two Vermonters could identify and articulate what the state's economic development strategy is, or what any local community's economic development strategy is. Today, this is made even more complex by the fact that we are not an economy, a commerce that trades with itself, within itself. We are buffeted by global forces, whether or not they're the tariffs imposed by our tweet-a-day president, or by our relationships with Canada and Mexico, and the on-again, off-again Trans-Pacific Partnership and North American Free Trade Act, and whatever its successor has become if the U.S. Congress can ever get around to passing it. Despite what people want to believe, a friend of mine recently quipped, Vermont is not going to grow its economy, it's not going to ensure economic expansion, it's not going to ensure economic prosperity, especially though for those at the lower end of the income scale, one kombucha shop at a time, or one CBD shop at a time, or one brewery at a time, or anything one-off at a time. Those are great. They provide some jobs, they provide some creativity, but they are not foundational and bedrock to our economic development. And this is despite well-intentioned people working on it, millions of dollars being spent every year on it, a network of regional development and regional planning commissions that wake up every day and think about this stuff, and despite the fact that every governor that I have known, and it goes back a long time, have made economic development the centerpiece of their administration, and we're still where we were when the two-hand set shot was still popular in basketball. That's back when the acid tests were going on. So we have, and this is a kind of an homage to my mentor, Bill Schubart. We have a hub and spoke model where the hubs are loose, the spokes are rusty, and an economic toolbox where the bottom is about to fall out. So, I'm supposed to pose questions now for all of you to contemplate, cogitate, and then discuss with me facilitating. So here are your questions. Do you accept, reject the premise, or have a counter proposal? And if you accept that perfection can never be attained and that stagnation is cancerous, what is your vision for economic development in your community and in the state? What kind of actions do you expect from your economic development leaders? And is leadership unitary or collective? Is there a leader in the 21st century for economic development, or do we have a whole new model? I have an opinion, but you don't care. What has to be done in your community, the state, the region, to spur economic development and move the needle? If our goal, and I start with this assumption, that our goal is an expanding economy that benefits all Vermonters, that especially lifts up people at the lower end of the income scale so that everybody can fully participate in our economy and our democracy. That's my premise. So what do we need to do to move that needle? And then, how do we incorporate not just business, but our major nonprofit employers? Because let's face it, our largest employer in the state of Vermont is now the University of Vermont Health Network, which is a nonprofit provider, and government. Government is the second largest employer. Business cannot do it alone. The private sector cannot do it alone, it's my opinion. So how do we incorporate nonprofits and government in that? And with that, I'm supposed to shut up and not have a lot of feedback in the mic, and you're supposed to talk. And yes, thank you, because I'm supposed to pick on somebody if they don't talk.
My name is Stephen Marshall. I work in the homeless community in Burlington, Vermont, and I'm preparing to enter UVM as a candidate for master's degree in 2020 in economic development.
Okay.
Could you please stand?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Do you need me to repeat myself, or was that good enough? My name is Stephen Marshall. I work in Burlington in the homeless community, and I'm entering UVM in 2020 as a master's candidate in economic development. I reject the premise.
Okay, good.
I think that continued economic expansion is merely the continued increasing wealth on the wealthy end of the scale. If you want to talk about increasing the wealth, eliminating poverty, you need to have specific policies for removing wealth increase at the top of the economic scale and shifting that wealth back down the economic ladder. That means undermining the loopholes and tricks and gimmicks that are used to migrate wealth up, as opposed to having it migrating down. In other words, when you have an entire financial security plan that's based on the idea that you're investing equity into your homes, everybody wants their property to get more expensive. If you had a system which provided adequate social services so that you didn't have to rely on your property values would not have to go up, and it would be possible for the economic wealth to be distributed better. And that's just one example. But I want to decouple the idea that an expanding economy is necessarily good for poor people. They are unrelated variables, and you need to look at them separately.
Okay, what do folks think about that? Go ahead.
My name is Zahn. He says I come from the South, Guildford, and I'm really entranced by New Zealand right now, who talks about the well-being of the nation. They're making economic policies and governmental policies based on well-being of everyone in the country. I think economic growth is important, but so is every other kind of growth. Economic growth or economic prosperity or whatever you want to say is just one measure in many measures that need to be taken. And when we focus too much on the economic development as an end itself, we shut off the possibility, not unlike what you're talking about, looking at the well-being of every single citizen.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'd like to point out that economic expansion not only has tended to concentrate wealth at the top, but it also depletes the planet's resources. So I think the real challenge for us, particularly when we're talking about a climate economy, is how to have a healthy, viable climate that is sustainable in the sense of not depleting the planet's resources.
Can you have a healthy climate economy and a healthy economy? Are the two exclusive or not? I'm curious.
You got the answer, Tom. You're rich.
I would say that I think it was 2 years ago when they had the Climate Economy Summit here.
Yep. I'm sorry. Can I just hold off for a second? I'm supposed to ask all of you to identify who you are and where you're from. I apologize for not doing that before. I broke the rules already. Go ahead.
All right. My name's Ben Doyle. I work for USDA Rural Development.
Okay.
I live in Montpelier. 2 years ago here, they had the Climate Economy Summit here. I think it was Danny Kennedy was the speaker.
Okay.
He wrote like Rooftop Revolution or something like that. And this is the thing that stuck with me 2 years later. He stood right there and he said, the change to a carbon neutral economy is the greatest single economic opportunity in the history of humanity. And I really think that that's true. It's not about like how do you balance, growth or economic growth with it's how do you catalyze the economy by switching to a carbon-free economy. So I don't think that they're.
So what are the elements? I mean, this go with that for a little bit, if you would. So what are the elements of a carbon-free economy? I mean, it assumes carbon-free and economy. Economy usually means jobs and wages and prosperity and all of that. So what is a carbon? Yeah.
So, I'm not yet, but I'll go.
No, I put you on the spot, sorry.
But, just talking to people, I think some of the smartest people in the state are working on this, right? And when you talk about the idea of, when we all buy heating oil, and 80 cents out of every dollar goes out of the state and ultimately to Saudi Arabia, or we could be potentially developing this regional system of pellet mills that's using the woodshed of the northern forest, and that money stays in a kind of virtuous cycle in our economy, supporting those people who have dropped into poverty when the sawmills close. I mean, I feel like there's a way here to transition the way in which we're utilizing our resources that can re-energize our economy, but I think it's going to take way bolder thinking than we have seen thus far.
I would agree on I'm not supposed to agree. I think you're right. One, it takes bolder thinking, and I also think that utilizing kind of Vermont-based resources to create jobs and create opportunities for people who have lost opportunities, especially up in the Northeast Kingdom, with the old, pulp and paper plants and the factories that made furniture. This is a new way of kind of meeting 21st century needs using Vermont-based resources and ingenuity. And I look at Avram, and he must have something to say about, energy. No? Okay.
Okay.
You just had that look, I'm sorry. Plus, I know you.
Avram Pat from Worcester, and a member of the House of Representatives currently. That's my current part-time job. And I have an energy background. In terms of...
That was supposed to be helpful.
Sorry.
In terms of...
thank you.
Energy, I am always struck by the fact that both energy production as well as carbon emissions don't respect political boundaries. They do not respect town lines, county lines, regional planning commission lines, Chamber of Commerce territory lines, state lines, or national lines. And that tends to be, we tend to look at the economics of energy strictly in terms of what it does in our own economy, the Vermont economy, and that is important. But where we live in Worcester, does it matter that a renewable energy plant that might be serving our area is 30 miles away in New Hampshire, as opposed to being a whole lot further away in Bennington? In other words, this is an area where I feel we need to let go a little bit of thinking only in terms of the political boundaries that we have jurisdiction over.
And some would say, again...
Since you asked.
No, and some would say, channeling what Bill Schubart said to me, which was, we have to start thinking about Vermont as being insular, not just in energy, but in all aspects, because we live downstream of a global economy, and we can't think of whether it's Chittenden County or Franklin County or wherever. We have to think of impacts that hit us across the world. Gentleman back there had a comment. Oh. Wow. Get your steps in today.
Hi, I'm Martin Hans with the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. I have a question to the gentleman from Burlington, because I live in central Vermont. Some of the towns where I live, Washington, Orange, Marshfield, Thetford, East Sprint, are all losing population. They have no economic, their economic vitality is being drawn out, their school systems are in decline. If we're not talking about economic development, we're talking about economic distribution. How does East Corinth benefit from that? And I mean it because I don't know. All I'm seeing in my communities are decline.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a dialogue. Please.
So I'm really concerned about the idea of population depletion.
Obviously, there's a linkage between economic activity and the well-being of the entire community. And if you're depopulating, that's a different signal. The signal is that there's nothing going on there. How do you create activity in the local community so people want to go there and live there? I would suggest to you, yes, obviously you need economic activity. I wanted to de-link the idea that a growing Chittenden County necessarily produces more wealth for the poor people that live in that county. In your case, I was going to say, talk about something different, which is, I think we need to have a fiber optic backbone to every single little village in the state, owned by the state or a public utility, which then allows the local community to distribute internet in whatever way it wants to. Another idea, have economic development where you get theaters and other cultural activities. You need to make every little town not just economically interesting, but you need to actually have net inflow of resources. The model, I think of it is the state of Vermont needs to have as much money coming in as going out. Every county has to have as much money coming in as it has going out. How do you get money to come in? You have to have resources. Is that going to be physical resources or human resources?
Okay.
You choose, you do it. Those are my answers.
Good. I just got it. Dimitri, do you have something? You had your hand up, and then I'll go to you, sir, in the middle. Alan.
Thank you. So a couple of things. One, I can't take the microphone at an economic development forum and not say one of the worst things that we can do in Vermont is continue this dialogue that Vermont is bad for business. So I just think this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, so we have to focus on the positive and we have to focus on the resources that we do have. Now, in terms of the role of economic expansion, I accept the hypothesis. I agree with the counter that economic expansion is not a solution for poverty. Right. Frankly, poverty is a structural issue that I think this is an intellectual failure in our culture that we've chosen not to deal with poverty. However, economic expansion is critical in terms of preventing the further decline of the middle class into poverty or into lower socioeconomic sizes that then become counterproductive. And we've struggled with this in Bennington. So I'm part of the Putnam Redevelopment, and we have asked the question whether putting $55 million into redevelopment of our core downtown infrastructure will be good for everybody in the community. And we've accepted that the answer is no. There's no one thing we can do that could be good for everybody in the community. But we've accepted that not doing this project is absolutely unacceptable because we will just continue to see the type of decline that you were talking about on the other side of the room here. So we think it's necessary but not sufficient. And sorry, one more thing, which is the only way this happened is it took bold moves by creative leaders and risk-taking.
Before I get to Alan, I know he's left. Alan, then you, Mary in the back. Hold on. Paul left, but I do want to say this. Oh God. I serve.
You have this.
I know, it's supposed to be working. Does it not work? Oh, it works to that. Why no? I usually, I serve on the Vermont Downtown Board that helps identify downtowns, neighborhood, all the designations we have in the state of Vermont. And I can't tell you, every month people come in from very small towns like yours where things have not been going well. And these are local people who have passion for their communities, and they start by saying, we would not be here today if it wasn't for Paul Costello and them coming into town and doing the town visioning and getting everybody together. And I've known Paul for a long time, and I often wondered what he really did. And now I'm seeing it on a monthly basis, these folks coming in and saying, we have hope, we have ideas for our town, whether it's broadband or whether it's something else. We have a vision that really has been derived from Paul's listening tour, which I think I should give a shout out to Paul. Now, Alan and then Mary.
This may be a broken record, but I suggest that you all study the Bank of North Dakota. The Bank of North Dakota is a state-owned bank. We live in a resource extractive economy that's run by banks. When you pay interest to a bank, it's money that you made in your location that will never come back. The towns and at least the counties in Vermont are big enough to have their own bank. I think that we should find a way to trust the people who live in the communities within the counties to order the economic long-term growth. And particularly in Vermont, around the forests that they have and the minerals that they have, and the scenery and whatever else. But I'm a forester. I grow trees for 300 years. I won't grow them for 300 years because I won't be here. But the trees may be, and they will have no value that are economic until they're cut. We have to find a way to help the people who hold healthy, valuable forests to employ people on a regular basis in town with dependable wage rates that you can raise a family. If you can't do that now. None of the loggers that work for me have stable families. This is horrible. Unless they're $2 million in debt, and that means the money is going to somebody else.
Mary?
Mary Bryan from Groton. We've seen on both sides of the state, in Newport and in Burlington, the failure, I think, that Burlington might very well be a failure, but not yet, of the grand schemes, bringing in outside money to build this, process of abatement, this E5 scheme, is just an awful embarrassment and a scandal. Have we learned a lesson? Do we think that the best way is to nurture small businesses? And everybody seems to want the big scheme that comes from outside money. And, we need help. We've seen people work very, very hard at their small businesses, and because of government regulations and everything, leaning on them, no kind of help at all, they have had a hard time surviving. So, do we need to nurture small businesses?
Well, I have an opinion on that, but I'm not going to share it. I'm curious what other people say, because I think you've hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways. So let's hear what people think. How do we grow? Do we grow small or do we start big?
Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I'm a student at UVM. I'm also interested in that, so just going into this, the context that you have given of growing tariffs and different regulations that hurt our economy because we're so globalized in Vermont, and that's hard and confusing to understand, I feel like, for me. So I naturally try to tend my thoughts towards the relocalization of the markets, along with keeping small businesses, but also with small farmers and having that economy be boosted up through policies. And I feel like we've seen a lot of economic development in New England specifically, and going back to the point of, it's not really town lines or specifically state lines, but regional lines. With the recycling movement, we've seen a lot of plants opening up to keep our economies more local, and I'm interested if anyone has any thoughts about the local economy. Oh, also, I want to give a shout out to Mary because she was the first woman to talk today.
Up here, Betsy.
Betsy, Franklin, Randolph County. I'm going to put a little spin on this because when I think about economic development, I think about recreation and how to really make your communities more movable and creating access to all your recreation opportunities, your local small businesses, and creating access to your communities, recreation paths, canoeing, kayaking, any access off your, we're on the Siskiyou River, Lake Champlain. We have the Loyola Valley Trail and the Siskiyou Trail that comes through our communities. So how do we get people to stop in our downtowns? So we have vital communities, village core projects, just making your community more movable and accessible. And I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, it'll drive community or economic development if it's more accessible, and people will want to come and live where it's more movable. And we've seen an increase in population in Franklin and Randolph County because it's a little cheaper and we've got more accessibility, movability, and we really value that outdoor recreation and recreation piece and open space and vital village and village core, and really taking what's in our community that just needs a little extra love and making it kind of shine again.
And you're seeing that in the Northeast Kingdom, in East Burke, with the mountain biking and the hordes of people who come down to Burke every year. Gail, and then Chris.
It seems to me that perhaps one way of pulling all these strands together, Gail Stevenson, and I've worked in economic development for the past couple of years, primarily with Quebec. Pulling all these strands together is that my experience is that the interests of big business and the interests of small business are very, very different. And which is not an answer to your question, given that we have all these strains about the difficulties of small business, with which I agree, and then the focus of big business, which is completely different. How do we, as a state, work with that? What do you actually do to prioritize one or the other, prioritize both? That's, I think, answers the question.
And it goes to the question where we started. Chris, go ahead.
But I'll see if I can get it. So small business to me is the answer. 90% of businesses in Vermont are small businesses, 40% or less. Some of these small businesses grow up to be sold to multinational corporations and still employ people in Vermont. We have a couple of examples of that. To me, that's the economic model. We hold more patents per capita than any other state in the country. And this is because most of these inventions came about 100 years ago. It's because of our transportation system back then. We had to rely on ourselves as an independent state. Part of our culture is independence. We don't like people telling us what to do in Vermont. And I think these are the things we have to trade on. I really take Dimitri's point. We need to be the biggest boosters for our state. We have in our state other things and qualities that in other states would gladly trade for. You know, we have a quality of life that's second to none. We have an educational system, K-12, that is second to none. Where we all know where we struggle is with modern day communications. It's attracting young people to our state and getting them to stay here. Both my kids live in Vermont. Both of them graduated from Vermont colleges. Both of them are putting down roots that they value their experience in Vermont. There is no one secret to unlocking the economic potential to Vermont. It's basically everything we were talking about today, a variety of different groups. It's community leaders. We have authentic communities in Vermont, which they don't have throughout this country. We have communities where you can get engaged if you want to. You just have to raise your hand, as my son found out when he went to St. George's community meeting this year. They offered him a position on the select board. He lived in town for 3 months. These are the secrets to Vermont and why we have successful businesses in Vermont, is because this community supports them. And I think those are the things that we have to trade on. And those are the things that we can lure other entrepreneurs to our state. It is easy to start a community business in Vermont. To scale it up is somewhat challenging, but it is easy to start a community business. Oh, I'm Chris Cole. I am on the Planning Commission of the town in Richmond, and my day job is Commissioner of Buildings and General Services for the state of Vermont.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm from Stratford and also a UBS student. I just wanted to counter something from the previous point of the education system here in Vermont. My dad's recently tried to sell his house, and he found a buyer, but he was hoping to sell it to a young family because we live right across from the elementary school. But he found it difficult to sell to a young family because the reality is that the quality of the elementary school, as painful as it is for me to say, is declining because we just don't have as much population here, which means there's lack of funding for the school. Same thing's happening in high school. And so I think for me, the most important thing, I haven't had much experience personally in economic development, as only 19, but I do still know some economic theory, and it's really important to make investments in both human capital as well as technological advancements. And human capital, I think for me, obviously drawing young families in here, and one thing that I remember from a couple years back with Redevelopment and the Syrian refugees that they brought in, they saw a huge economic boost because that's new people that are really making a dedication to the new community that they joined. That's boosting human capital and bringing young families, boosting the population, helping them get funding for schools because they will pay for taxes. And then we also have technological advancements, which I think something that will really help that is if we bring more young families and young people have a lot of ideas, and as we've been saying, with Mary being the first woman to be speaking, we also have a lot of older people speaking at this in this particular discussion. And again, the more we bring in young people into these kinds of discussions, the more that we are able to foster young people in these communities, they will bring in technological advancements, which is one of the ways that we see economic growth.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Josh Anker, David is Commissioner of Housing and Community Development, and I've been involved in funding projects, housing, community centers, business expansions for close to 20 years now. And there's an irony that just always gets me that the gentleman talked about the trees and we need a place to process them. And it just pains me to remember all the projects that were locally driven entrepreneurs. A child care facility that was opposed by the neighbors, an expansion that was opposed by someone, that I think we need to be welcoming of all types of people, all ideas, all theories, all energy that's being poured into your community. And just because it's not the energy that you would bring, doesn't mean it's going to be, it's not going to be beneficial. And we're too small, the communities we live in, to have people opposing something because it doesn't exactly fit their view of what should be expanding in town or how it should or shouldn't be growing. We need density in our villages. We need more housing. We need housing that might not be, what you live in your big house with a couple acres. It might be an apartment next to yours, and you need to welcome that. Otherwise, you're not going to have the young families, you're not going to see the growth and investment, and we need to realize that the future is built on the past. It's not going to be the same as the past, and so that would be my plea for folks in every one of the communities that struggle with this, is just be open to someone's new energy and ideas, even if it doesn't fit your exact view or your exact political idea.
It's hard to let that one go without commenting. I think you're right, and we see that around the state. I'm sorry I don't have a mic, so I'll just have to yell. We rail against the intolerance on the right and, the anti-refugee rhetoric and that vile that's spewed. But, sometimes the rhetoric on the left is as damaging and polarizing as the rhetoric on the right. We just don't. Personally, I don't like the stuff on the right. I'm a little bit more aligned with the rhetoric on the left. However, to your point, when you get to a community and you're talking about housing, you're talking about schools, you're talking about mental health facilities or child care facilities, we all need to be a little bit more collaborative and accept stuff that might make us feel uncomfortable. I said this not that long ago, we all came from someplace else. We're all refugees, unless you happen to be one of the indigenous people. So let's, in our community dialogues, at least try to have a little bit of a civil conversation and not look like the stuff that goes on somewhere else. I'm sorry. Some things you just can't Let go.
Hi, I'm Kristen Murphy. I'm the director of our Vermont's Developmental Disabilities Council.
Thank you.
I just wanted to insert another component into this conversation that I haven't heard much about today, and that's a question about what it's costing us for healthcare and health insurance in the state. And of course, that healthcare is a huge piece of Vermont's economy, and as we age, it will continue to be a huge piece of our economy. And we are now several years into a significant next generation experiment in how we contain cost and improve quality in our healthcare. And you may have noticed that now, several years in, our private insurers were granted, at least one was granted, a double-digit increase in premium costs. We have 5 hospitals, rural hospitals, that will be coming up before the Redevelopment Care Board with significantly struggling budget problems, burdened by large dues that they are paying to our accountable care organization. We have a Medicaid program that is increasingly becoming privatized and has invested millions and millions of dollars in this particular experiment, disproportionate to what other payers have invested. And I would really urge folks to think about, something that at least small business and the average Vermonter, I can't speak to big business, but they share is a need to have high quality health care at an affordable cost.
Yeah. Education, child care, health care, jobs. Over and over again, when you ask people what will attract or keep them to Vermont or keep them in Vermont, those things come up over and over and over again. And we're doing better in some, not so great, as you pointed out, in healthcare. 10.5%, that's hard to swallow.
Hi, Sarah Waring.
Hi.
With Vermont Community Foundation, East Montpelier. It's interesting to me to think a little bit about, in the last visioning session, we had a question about what is the vision for this sort of arena. And one of the things I've observed over the years is how complex a vision around economic development looks, right?
Yeah.
And I think these dichotomies, whether they are true or perceived around big business or industrial or importing business from the EB5 sort of scheme to sort of our cottage industries or our artisan work, small versus big, and then in some cases socially responsible, versus not, I guess, socially responsible. A lot of the work that we see around the state with our incubators, our co-working spaces, our digital or remote sort of focus, but then at the same time thinking about manufacturing, thinking about jobs in place that provide a level of infrastructure. We're trying to do a lot when it comes to our vision for economic development. I wonder a little bit, one of the things I hear when I talk to employers, no matter how big they are, is about labor rate participation, workforce development, and it's about some of those key barriers to be able to get qualified, skilled workers in the workforce, right? So in many cases, that might be that the people who live in place don't have the skills that the employer needs. In other cases, it might be that there are family support structures that are needed to enable those people to come to work, right? So, family-friendly workplaces, so almost even social service kind of oriented workplaces where you understand trauma-informed practices, etc. And I wonder sometimes about whether or not we couldn't, for our economic development vision for the state, pick something like subsidized childcare or healthcare or education and say, if we as a business community and economic development community got behind one of these issues that is tangential to what we as a business does, but would essentially affect our labor rate participation, could we not move the needle for all the scales of business, be they big or small, in a way that is a bit more transformational than trying to pick winners and losers, right? I don't know that it's possible. But.
You can never pick winners and losers because you can never pick them 100% of the time. So, I mean, you go down a rabbit hole if you start trying to pick winners or losers. But to your point, I think the business community, whether it's socially responsible or irresponsible, two areas that you see business working on. One is supporting the Permanent Fund in their quest to get fully paid pre-K for all kids in Vermont. I think business sees that as a key business economic development issue. And then what the United Way, at least in Chittenden and Franklin County, is doing around the Working Bridges program. So dealing with trauma-informed decision-making, accepting that people have to get the clinics, they have to get the counseling, they have to da-da-da-da-da, and not saying we have to be here 9 to 5. So there is a huge transition, I think, in your traditional business, large or small, whether it's Global Foundries or the local kombucha shop, understanding that the employee base is different today than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And again, not to be patronizing, but I think the discussions that have been led around some of the visioning that you all have done has helped employers see beyond their daily grind of, I just got to get this done, I just got to get this done. So here's a question, it's 3:10, 3:11. How does the state, and who should be setting up the vision and then the strategy? How does that come together? Because we've heard diametrically opposite things. We've heard state banks and redistribution of wealth, legitimate topics of discussion. We've heard large versus small, organic versus top-down. But who does it? Sure. Don't tell me Bill Sayer does it, because then I'm in trouble.
Brown of the Public Bank Institute has written a paper just recently talking about what China does that's different than here. They have free healthcare.
Yep.
They have business financing that is done by the state. They have free education. Basically, the structure that business operates under is completely different than what it is here. I think we need to change to a value-oriented system rather than a profit-oriented system, so that the value actually goes right into the community to find its source, rather than this extractive idea of profit to somebody who doesn't live in the community.
Well, I mean, the challenge is some do live in the community. I mean, if you look at Vermont,
that I work in too,
and most Vermont businesses are Vermont-owned.
Okay.
So,
but they also pay interest if there's funded outside to outside. It goes outside. It may be 3 or 4 times what they borrow, and this ought to stay in the community.
Okay.
My only point is that Ellen Brown has written a paper that talks about the differences between these two economies and why the idea of currency valuations is really not terribly important. It's really what drives the cost that the employer sees at home.
Assume that you go in that direction. I'm still curious, and then we'll get, how does it all come together? Say we accept that premise and we're going to take Alan Brown's book. Who does it? Is it a leadership issue? Is leadership singular or collective? I mean,
okay, I went to a study bank commission for the formation of a public bank in Massachusetts.
Yep.
The Massachusetts Banking Commission Bankers Association was able to bring the press into the room, hear the bankers' presentation, and take the press out. There were only 5 or 6 people in there.
Okay. We got to move off that, because in fairness to everyone else, Vermont has studied a state bank a bunch of times. I'm not part of that. I have no dog in the fight. So it's out there, and people are talking about it. But I think Kate, I'm trying to read your name. Yes, you're up.
Hi, I'm Kate Lally. I'm a community.
I know, it's horrible.
I'm a community design consultant. Okay, I just wanted to say that place and setting have always and always will set the stage for economic development. And I think if you look at the historic Vermont landscape, we see tremendous locational efficiencies in the way that the overall landscape was organized, which was largely rural villages and towns that are connected, and there's a relationship to how far apart they were and that sort of thing, right? And so that was done for many reasons. And now we have a situation where we have success being concentrated in very few locations in Vermont, and the rest of Vermont is languishing, right? We basically have two Vermonts, right? I think that if we also, in my opinion, have tremendous locational inefficiencies because we have a love affair with the car, and that has driven settlement patterns that we see all over the place that are unsustainable, affordable, and are just very problematic for many reasons, right? So I think that if we go back to this idea that place and settings set the stage for economic development, we have this wonderful existing infrastructure of our rural villages and towns and our urban places. They exist on all scales, actually, in Vermont, from Bennington and Rutland, et cetera, down to small villages. We need to see this as infrastructure that we can leverage again. And we also have at the same time demand that we are not able to meet for living in walkable, compact settlements. People want to live in those places, particularly young people. And I would venture to say that aging people do too, because it gets pretty hard to live on your X number of acre spread, right? When you're aging. Do you want to be stuck in place, or do you want to age in place, right? So I would say that a problem I see in working in land development is that a lot of our funding strategies and our standards are very much calibrated to the large urban places. There's a reason why places like Burlington are really thriving, and there are many, many reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that it's easier to get you have easier access to funding for basic infrastructure and broadband and all of the things tend to concentrate in those places. What if, like the woman who was speaking earlier, we looked at things through a different lens? We reframed how we use, how we approach land use and integrate it more with transportation. And we create, in a very place-based, scale-appropriate, stronger local economies. I think that would provide the bedrock. So that would be things like wastewater and water for rural communities that don't have it yet, so they can actually have the compact walkable development, that can be, and broadband would be another way to invest. Maybe it's too expensive to bring it to every rural place, but we could certainly bring it to those centers.
We can do better than we're doing. I'm smiling because, what was it, Josh? 2 months ago, we approved a community wastewater septic, whatever you call it, system for Westford, Vermont. Oh, okay, your work. Were you the one who presented, and I should remember that? Oh, thanks. But no, that to me was a great example of this is where people want to be. What's the impediment? Wastewater, septic. Let's give them some money, let's help them fund it, and we did. So I can complain a lot about the state, but the state does some good stuff every now and again. Sorry. Go ahead. And other people haven't talked. Please, you got 10 minutes to talk. Go ahead.
I'd like to address your question.
Sure.
Who should decide?
Thank you.
So,
not me.
Democracy. We have, by living in a democracy, the benefit of the wisdom of the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
We get all the minds in the states to contribute. Unlike the dictatorship, where it's only what one person wants, and that one person is generally pretty stupid. So what we need to do is to take advantage of democracy. You have a state government whose job it is to represent the community. It is the voice of the community. It has to be the place where that plan is made through democratic process. So it has to talk to the towns, it has to talk to regional planning commissions, it has to talk to the business community, the housing developers. Everybody's got to be involved, and it's got to be, including all the activists. There's a tendency in government to leave the activists out. So let's make sure that environmentalists, the activists for the homeless community, the activists for mental health people, the activists against economic development. We're all involved. And come up with a plan.
Yeah,
I just want to point out that like we have the statewide SEDS document, right? The Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. But no offense to the great people that worked on it, it's kind of a grab bag, right? Everything's in there. Like, let's work on everything all the time. You know, and truthfully, like, you know, we're federal funders. We try to fund projects that are identified in SEDS documents because they're kind of funded by EDA, and it's like everything falls under a SEDS document, right? So I think that there have been attempts through state government before to do it, but it's like, it's got to be done better.
Amen. A couple of us are laughing, having lived through SEDS. It rhymes with something else, but that's okay.
My name's Alyssa. I live and work in Monterey on economic development and on the issue of, who's deciding it. I just want to put in a plug for kind of the theme of today and local involvement and local participation. I spend a lot of my time with one-off kombucha and craft beer stores, but not to say that isn't important. Also not for people who do economic development work all the time, but as was said earlier by Josh, there is local politics in your 5-person planning commission and what housing densities they're going to allow and what their new zoning rewrite and how that's going to impact your local businesses, and having people advocate for that who aren't being paid to do so or have that as their full-time profession can be really powerful. We're working on workforce issues or childcare, so just to put in plugs for your ability to be involved, no matter your professional background, as well as repeating recreation and technology, which was said earlier, and getting in folks involved, because that's definitely part of why I feel really lucky to be in Vermont.
Oh, Josh, you're next. It's really heartening, and this is not patronizing to use that word, to see young people engage in discussing, because my generation, we didn't get it right, and you got to do better than we did. So thank you for being here. No pressure. Come on.
Yeah, my name is Mackenzie again. I feel like even sitting here and talking to all of you great smart people that have such a power and privilege to be involved in this process, just being able to go to university and study these topics. And I think that my purpose and what I feel like empowered by is giving that privilege that I have back into the communities that are working on these development projects. So I think it's also a plug for really the place-based development and listening to the needs of the community, because I think it's really problematic for someone who doesn't particularly know or anything. Like if I had tried to go into a community I never met and I was like, well, maybe you should work on this, but instead of me like listening to them through groups and all these different things and having that brought back to a position of power, I think is really important. And I think that's where our decision making should be coming from the people. So.
Yeah. Josh? And then way in the back afterwards. Nice.
Just real quick, a second on the recreation. There's a study that rural communities are struggling across the country, but those that have and emphasize the recreation opportunities aren't struggling as bad. They're holding their own. And we have tremendous opportunity in Vermont to do that. I'm involved in things here in Randolph and other places, and the energy, the folks that come out to those sort of groups and meetings, you see the young people, you see the new families, and they want to be involved, and they might not realize they're doing economic development, but they are. When you have their number, you have their contact, and so highlight what you've got in every community is a good strategy.
Gentleman in the back. And I think you will have the last comment, if it takes 4 minutes. Oh.
A quick plug. I'm Elijah Massey, U.S. State Rural Development. But I want to speak just briefly. We want to continue the conversation, particularly about infrastructure and small towns and how we can kind of continue the conversation. And either if you're from a small town and you want to work on that, or you have a lot of experience about infrastructure development and what we can do to make these communities more attractive, both for the folks that are already there and attracting other people. The Vermont Community Development Association. We're going to have a fall meeting in Brandon at the beginning of November. So put it on your calendars. We'd love to have all of you to continue this conversation, specifically about the community piece. Thank you.
We have time for one more, kind of like the last waltz. One more, just one more. A lot of music references. 2 more, 3 more. You might have to wait. Go ahead, you haven't spoken yet. Your turn.
Hi guys, I'm Joe Rushford, the town manager of Fairhaven, Vermont. The things we're doing in Fairhaven is pretty much a hodgepodge of what everybody else said here. Recreation, we just talked about recreation. And when we started to improve our recreation programs, we did start seeing people come on more. Elijah, his organization just helped us out with a little bit of money. We're now loaning that money to our small businesses in town. Somebody said what was the idea? Large businesses are the key to, I disagree with that 100%. Small business is the key. Your little cottage industry living, in my opinion. The small home businesses, the towns can help support them. They can grow and help support the rest of the community. Maybe, one or two employees. It really helps to circulate that cash. Last point, it might sound negative, but as a bureaucrat, I can tell you the government's not going to help you. If we really want economic development, it's going to be on us to start our businesses, refurbish those buildings ourselves, paint and employ people from our communities.
Wait a minute. All right, I promised Avram, but you were going to get the last word. That's dangerous. Okay. Go ahead, Avram.
Just for people's information, broadband in rural areas was mentioned by a couple of people here, and the legislature passed a very significant broadband expansion bill in the last session. The committee I'm on did most of the work on that. And the administration just announced the sort of rollout of that. The bad news about broadband expansion in rural areas is that we can't just make it so like rural electrification during the New Deal. And it has to be from the bottom up. The good news is it has to be from the bottom up. And that what the bill does primarily is put in a variety of ways, money and other ways, tools and resources to make it happen from the bottom up. It takes local organizing to get that done into broadband to the last mile.
Good. All right, Alan, you're it.
I'm going to try to be brief.
You got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know. Vermont's forest industry is a distributed energy resource. It's a distributed carbon evolution base if it isn't used when the trees die. There are evolving technologies, some of them go by the name of biochar, but it is possible to do more than just fuel your school with wood chips. You can make small-scale liquid fuel systems and make charcoal. I just talked to Kate about using charcoal in her waste treatment plant to remove the nutrition that is going out of either septic systems or municipal sewage treatment plants. We've shown that we can, with a 3-second pass-through of sewage wastewaters, remove 25% of the phosphates that would normally go into the Connecticut River. That's a 3-second pass-through. It's not sitting in a 24-foot dumpster box for 3 days as it
titrates through, yeah.
So there are local opportunities here to look at this forest base in many different ways. It's a distributed energy base. We have a very distributed energy user. The distributed efficiency of the grid is about 10%. So you're throwing away 90% of the energy that you burn or that you put into the system, whether it be oil, coal, natural gas, or wood. It doesn't make any sense to me to truck that wood out of town if there's a way for you to make these things in town and use them locally.
And I will put in a last plug for forest products in general. It's one of the industries, oh, I don't have to yell. It's one of the industries that I think gets the most knocks. And it's one of the hardest, if you will, in the environmental world to get through permitting. I know getting in the fields, getting out of the fields, how much you can take, erosion, all of that, legitimate issues, but unlike a lot of other renewable industries, forest products, you get a lot of bad press, sometimes undeservedly. What's that?
A lot more to say.
A lot more to say. We'll let it go with that. It's 3:31. Thank you. I hope it was helpful. It's been a fun discussion.
My name is John Copans. I am the program director for the Climate Economy Model Communities Program with the Council on Rural Development. I have the honor of introducing Governor Scott, our next speaker. You know, what I find so invigorating about this day is that we are in a crowd of doers, right? All of you, in different ways, are rolling up your sleeves, getting things done in your communities and throughout the state of Vermont. And it's not just about coming up with ideas. It's not just about making problem statements. It's about figuring out solutions and moving those solutions forward. We have a governor who has a record of public service that includes so many of those examples. I mean, how many of us have neglected tires in our basements and garages, just sitting there, waiting for their next life? Early on in his career, Governor Scott sort of solved that problem with the Wheels for Warmth program that's raised $400,000 for low-income Vermonters to heat their homes, and also found new homes for 50,000 tires across the state of Vermont. Like, that's a perfect example of rolling up your sleeves and getting things done. Similarly, after Tropical Storm Irene, mobile homes destroyed across the state of Vermont, and a real public policy conundrum. What do we do with those? How do we dispose of those mobile homes? Again, as Lieutenant Governor, Governor Scott pulled the right people together and solved that problem. He's taken the same approach as our governor, pragmatically focused on building our economy, making this state more affordable, and protecting the most vulnerable. And to me, what's most important, and I think probably to many of us, he's done it always with a deep commitment to the Vermont tradition of civility in public service. He's hewed to that North Star and set that example that I think so many of us believe in our work. So we really appreciate you being with us today, Governor Scott. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, John. I'm always worried about being one of the last speakers at a day-long conference. I know you've been here networking, listening, learning all day, and now I show up at the last minute to give my 2 cents. Worse yet is I'm standing between you and ice cream, so I'm very aware of that. You know, it takes a commitment to contribute and stay engaged during these long days, but that speaks to the hard work of community leadership in a lot of different ways. Enthusiasm ebbs and flows over time, and it takes real perseverance and commitment to stick it out for the long haul. So look around. For those of you who are here still here at 4 p.m. on a beautiful August afternoon, are most likely the ones leading or about to lead in your communities. You're surrounded by people who will define the future of Vermont, or you're still here for the ice cream, one of the two. Now, Vermont's future depends on each of you taking what you've learned today, putting it into practice in your communities, inviting your family, friends, neighbors, and yes, even those who don't agree with you to participate in the civic process. We all know the challenges Vermont faces, from workforce shortages, declining school enrollment, rural erosion, climate change, to a national political environment that's so polarized. We have so many obstacles to overcome. These obstacles will require change, resources, and long-term commitments. And just as importantly, to really make these things happen and face our challenges, we need leadership. We need you. Here's an example. Some of you probably were there. Last week I joined about 200 people to celebrate the groundbreaking of the Putnam Block in Bennington. It was easily the largest groundbreaking I've ever attended. There was even a waiting line to get in to the event. The construction phase of a $50 million project in the center of the Bennington downtown, a redevelopment that we heard the major project proponent, the champion, who was the president of a local bank, tell the crowd, this is not economically feasible. This comes from a banker. Yet there I was, side by side with him, Congressman Welch, Gus Seelig, and a number of other local leaders to celebrate the project and move forward with it, because it does make sense. Maybe not financially at first, but it's good for the region. It's good for Vermont. This groundbreaking was a culmination of 4 years of hard work. A lot of ups and downs. There was a point about a year or so ago, they couldn't go any further. They didn't think it was going to work. But somehow, some way, everyone came together to make it happen. So, work done, not by one leader, but by a group of leaders from all walks of life. The president of the hospital, local bank, and area colleges, the select board and town manager, the heads of the RPC and RDCs, and a dozen other community leaders who all stepped forward and said their town's future depended on a game-changing project. They met bi-weekly for years, building coalitions, establishing goodwill, and ultimately turned an unviable project or idea into a $50 million development project that was going to be successful. The highlight of the day came when the Bennington Redevelopment Group, this self-appointed leadership team, they were invited to the stage for recognition. The crowd of 200 rose to their feet for a round of applause, very appreciative of all their efforts and the great work that they did. And that's not the only good thing happening in Vermont. It's sometimes the little things. I had the pleasure on Saturday, 2 days ago, being asked to go to St. Albans for a charity-type ride. And it was Rise Vermont. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Rise Vermont, but it was homegrown, really a grassroots effort to talk about health and other issues, prevention and so forth. That's really the answer for our healthcare problems and some of what we're doing in Vermont. So we had this bike ride, 35-mile bike ride that we were going to go on. I like to bike, but we went and stopped at a few different communities along the way. The first was we rode down to the bay, St. Albans Bay. Now we just signed some legislation last week to clean up the lake, so it was appropriate that we were there. But the community was there to talk about, and even though there's an algae bloom in St. Albans Bay right now, they were talking about the attributes of what we're doing and how proud they were of the project they were doing in their community. They're moving their town offices, they're moving their salt shed, they're going to redo the park that's there, and they were very excited about that. So then we moved on and rode to Swanton. In the Swanton, they had the Rail Museum. They're trying to get off the ground. A group of people from all walks of life, once again, coming together to try and get this project off the ground. And they're very proud of that and showing us showcasing the project. We then went to Swanton outside the village. We talked to a group of folks that had had a capital campaign for a new playground at the school. And now they exceeded their goal of the capital campaign. Everything was all in place, and again, a group of people from all walks of life, not agreeing on everything, but they agreed on that project, and they were very proud of it. and then moved on and stopped in Highgate. And Highgate has some initiatives they want to put forward. They're talking about renovating the historic hotel that's there. Again, trying to get something off the ground with a bunch of different volunteers in the community that have been there for decades. The common denominator that I saw, that I appreciate, over all those places that we went to, was this sense of pride about who they were, what they are today, and what they want to be. And it's homegrown. They were asking for help, whatever help we could give them, but it's going to happen from their perspective because they're going to make it happen. And it's all about the pride they have in their communities and, again, what they want to become. It was very powerful that day, and I know that there are a number of different projects that you have in your own communities that are equally as important. But again, it's about getting people that have the right attitude to get things done. So my hope is that today's conference has given you some tools, the confidence and the inspiration to lead a response to a problem in your own community. And if you've been paying attention, I hope you first step forward to collaborate with other leaders, because that's what you have to do. Again, maybe people you don't agree with, but they might agree with you on this. So it takes all of us pulling in the same direction to get anything done. But finally, I want to thank the Vermont Council on Rural Development for recognizing the need for this event. Before I close, I hope you'll join me in thanking the leader that brought us all together today, Paul Costello, for his outstanding work. As you can see, Paul loves the accolades. I thank you for inviting me here today, and I look forward to your projects and what you see in your own communities, and hopefully we can be a part of that as well. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Governor Scott, and thank you for your statesmanship every day for Vermont. In a challenging world environment, you stand for us. We know it, we feel it, we deeply appreciate it. And all the hard work behind that. We see them on TV, we see them in the public, but there are long hours, there's some tough worries, and we appreciate what you carry for Vermont. And thank you, John, for the great work you do on the climate economy model community. I want to thank Jenna Koloski here for all of her leadership. Gemma Del Rossi, where's Gemma? Right here, who's a newcomer to us, but is doing great work to help us frame to the future. And then Margaret McCoy, where's Margaret? Our director, the executive director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, who really leads all our work. I want to thank all of our speakers, our partners, our moderators, our scribes, and our sponsors again. And I want to just share a quick reflection. It was wonderful to have my granddaughter here this morning. We went to a small town recently where the principal of the school said, we're not paying attention to the fact that our children are very anxious. We're seeing anxiety disorders in our children. We're seeing them blasted by a barrage of social media that says the world is in crisis. We're seeing gun violence. We're seeing the national situation. We're seeing the constant story of climate change on our children as though these 8 and 10-year-olds are going to resolve these issues for us. I went to a party. At the party, the adults in the room were joking about how the world will end in 20 years. And there were 8 and 10-year-olds in the room. This isn't, but don't blame those few people, because this is the way our society is talking right now. And it's time that we become the adults in the room, stand up, take the 5-year, the 10-year perspective on the challenges that are before us, line up together in action, just as each of you are doing in your communities. We are going to do it. We're at a point where we need to take courage to add up our moral willpower and vision to stand for direction, engage together, and step by step do the right thing for something bigger than ourselves, for community, the people we serve together. It's an honor to have that opportunity, and each of us is working in that arena right now. We should have faith in each other. We should have optimism to tell the moral story, have a moral courage and optimism to tell our kids, we're going to solve this, we're going to work forward, this is a beautiful world, and we're going to give you that beautiful world because we're completely dedicated to it, and we're going to do what it takes to make a world for you. That's what we're doing right now, and it's a tremendous honor to be part of the conversation. So thanks each and every one of you for what you brought to today. And now the last word on our agenda was closing reflections and action. The action's for all of us, right? So good luck doing your part. And we'll all pitch in together, and maybe we'll put up a little blog for us to share community leadership stories at the same time we're doing our work to build that community leadership guide. So thank you all so much for coming in. The ice cream's there. Scoopers should get to your places and double it up. Double it up. And let's see how well we can do on this Ben & Jerry's. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Governor.